Earlier in the week, Leslie messaged me and said, "Do you have any songs or hymns or anything you want sung?" I had nothing specific. So she messaged me back and said, "Okay, we're going to do this." And I said, "That's okay. I'm sure the snakes won't mind." And for those of you that know me a long time, I took that as a sign that I'm growing up, because I seriously considered getting a box, stenciling snakes on the side of it, and filling it up with plumbing equipment. But then I remembered that if you take a group of 100 people or so, which we're far short of this morning, there are probably three common things that they're afraid of: clowns, spiders, and snakes. So I resisted the temptation. I knew there'd be an affirmation there somewhere. The talk this morning is titled, "Whoa, I didn't see that coming." Life's full of moments that when you come through the other side of it, it's, whoa, I just didn't see that. I'll share one with you. I've had a good life. 62 years old. Been married to the same wonderful woman for 41 years tomorrow. Got 4 great kids, 8 wonderful grandchildren, and 1 on the way. I have a pretty good job. God's always taken care of us. And I only recall one crushing disappointment in my life. January the 8th, 1977, I was working at Sears. And we had a warehouse sale, and I had spent the entire day at the warehouse sale. I was exhausted. Had to take a bunch of paperwork and things back to the old Sears store on the corner of 15th Street and Walton Way, and got a phone call from Betty. It's time. She was due, our first child. Now, we'd gone through the Lamaze class, which was all the rage back in 1977. And we were about 2 classes shy of being through with the course. We were fast-tracked. So I raced home, quite literally, got her loaded up, went to St. Joseph's Hospital, and we started. Got there about 5 o'clock. Got her ready to go, and we proceeded to sit. And sit. And sit. Now, there's not a lot of young people in the day, but it used to be there was not 24-hour television. At about midnight, the TV would usually display the flag, the national anthem would play, there would be, martial, it was really neat, and then all of a sudden there would be a test pattern. It was just a weird-looking thing. And that was it. It was over. It was done. I forgot to bring a book with me, so we sat there and sat there. Now, because of the experience in the Lamaze class, I was part of this team. I mean, okay, breathe deep. Cleansing breath. Well, this went on. Midnight had passed. It got to be 2 o'clock. It got to be 3 o'clock. It got to be 4 o'clock. Long about 10 o'clock in the morning, they said, "Mr. and Ms. Martin, we're going to have to put you under and get you relaxed, and Mr. Martin, you're going to have to leave." "What?" "Well, she's going to be unconscious. You're not allowed to be in the room with her." I was crushed. I went from being an integral part of this miracle of life, and all of a sudden, I'm out in the waiting room with the parents. I went out in my car and wept. I didn't cry. I wept. It broke my heart. Now, I realize there are people out there that have gone through a lot worse things than I have, but that was my crushing disappointment. I'm proud to say now that we had 3 more kids, and I was there for all of them, and everything was wonderful. Although with my 3rd child, my son, he was born 45 minutes after we got to the hospital, and I found out that my wife knew words that I was not aware that she knew of. Uh, but that was a, whoa, I didn't see that coming. Because in my mind, I had played this out. I was going to be there. They were going to clean the baby up and hand it to me, because that was back before you found out what they were. Now, when these sonograms back then, nurse would come in and she had this weird looking thing she put on her head, and it had a pipe coming out with a little, and she put it on the stomach to listen to the heartbeat. Whoa, I didn't see that coming. The Bible's full of, whoa, I didn't see that coming moments. But the problem we run into now is we've heard the stories so many times, sometimes we lose the, wow, didn't see that coming. Adam in the Garden of Eden. Lonely, all he's got's animals. God knocks him out, swipes a rib, creates Eve. Can you imagine that? He wakes up, wow, didn't see that coming. One of my favorite characters in the Bible is Gideon. Gideon was one of the Israelite judges. And you all know the story. The Amalekites and the Midianites had invaded. They were wreaking havoc throughout the land. So God calls Gideon. Gideon sort of, I don't know about this, Lord. Give me a sign. So he sends an angel. And that's fine. Give me another sign. Take this fleece and cover it with dew and nothing else. And he was able to wring water out of the fleece. Okay, Lord, that's pretty good. Do it the other way. Let everything else get wet, not the fleece. God did it. So Gideon rounds up the people from around the countryside, 32,000 warriors. God said, no, don't want to do that. Y'all might think you had something to do with this thing when you pull it off. So anybody that doesn't really want to be here, going home. No shame. So 10,000 people pack up their tent and go home. 22,000 left. God said, no, still too many. You're going to think you did this if that many stay there. He had them go to the river and drink, and the ones that scooped the water up in their hands and kept their eyes open got to stay. Everybody else got to go home. 300 men. You remember, the enemy was camped down in a valley, and they surrounded the hills, 300 men. And they had a trumpet and a clay jar with a torch in it. Now, something that I'm sure somebody had discussed years ago, and I had forgotten. Okay, if you got a ram's horn in one hand and a clay jar with a torch in it in the other, guess what you don't have? You ain't carrying a sword. Okay, so you got 300 guys. They're around the hilltop, the enemy camp down there in the valley. Now, can you imagine these guys? Okay. We serve the God of our fathers, and he's done some pretty miraculous things. But there's only 300 of us. We're not carrying heat. All we've got is a ram's horn, which I don't know if you've ever heard of shofar. I've got a friend that's a Messianic Jew rabbi. And sometimes at meetings he blows the shofar. The shofar is pretty much a one-note instrument. And I think sometimes after we've heard the story hundreds of times, when we read the word trumpet, we're thinking brass instrument with 3 valves. No, it was a ram's horn. So, for God and for Gideon, the call went out. They smash the clay pots. They blow the ram's horn, and God sort of stirs up the bad guys. And they don't know what's happening. They think the hounds of hell are after him, so they take off. And can you imagine this skinny little Israelite guy on top of the hill? He's blowing his ram's horn, holding his torch, and going, wow, didn't see that coming. Al lived in Tennessee. Al was a hellraiser. He liked to drink. He liked to fight. He liked to shoot. Life changed for him, though. His best friend was killed in a bar fight. And Al, as they say, found Jesus. He found the Church of Christ in Christian Union, a branch of the Church of Christ that pretty much their creed was, if it's fun, you don't do it. Espoused a strict moral code which forbade drinking, dancing, movies, swimming, swearing, popular literature, and had moral injunctions against violence and war. Well, Al believed what he read. All of a sudden, his country was going to war. Al didn't want to go to war. Not because Al was a coward. Remember, Al was a hellraiser. He wasn't afraid to get in there and duke it out. But his Bible told him that he shouldn't. So after consulting with the officers in his camp, he spent some time, did some reading, and decided, I got to do this. So Al went to war. His company was assigned to take a ridge and then capture a section of railroad. During the course of the attack, German machine guns were turned on him, and the sergeant in charge was wounded. So Al had to take over. During the machine gun fire, most of the men in his company were injured. Al was left with 7 men. Al went forward and, with help, captured 132 Germans. Al's name was Alvin York, the most decorated soldier American soldier in World War I. A man that wasn't going to go to war because of his deep convictions. Wow, I bet you they didn't see that coming. The Apostle Peter. There's anybody in the New Testament that I can identify, it's Peter. I betrayed Jesus. My faith has wavered. I've run my mouth when I should have kept it shut. But Peter left a job as a fisherman. Rough life in the outdoors. He spent 3 years following an itinerant preacher. As I said, he betrayed Christ 3 times. He got out of the boat when Christ called him and started walking across the water, and he lost his faith. I don't know about you folks, but if I was in that situation, I'd have been curled up in a fetal position in the bottom of the boat. I'd have probably never got out of it. But Peter had the courage to do that. They went up on the Mount of Transfiguration, and he wants to build tabernacles and, set up tents and stuff. And Jesus, no. Just chill. But what really got me thinking was, can you imagine the Saturday night after the crucifixion? The followers of Jesus standing around, still in shock. I mean, Christ was supposed to set up a kingdom. We were supposed to, run the Romans off, get this thing under control. He's dead. Whoa, didn't see that coming. A guy named Thomas, at 16, went to work at a specialized construction firm. He worked all the way in all the departments, working his way up, learning his craft. In 1907, he began designing what was considered the crowning engineering achievement of that age, an accomplishment that still today captures our imagination. And on April 14th, 1914, he commented to a colleague, "Titanic is as near perfect as human brains can make her." And on April 15th, at 2:20 a.m., the ship slipped beneath the waves of the Atlantic and into history. Wow. Didn't see that one coming, did he? Thomas Andrews is the man's name. Have you ever wondered what would have happened if Satan hadn't overplayed his hand with Jesus? Christ was sent here as a propitiation for our sins, to pay the price. But what if Satan hadn't touched the heart of Judas and Judas hadn't betrayed him? What would have happened if Satan hadn't stirred up the hearts of the Jews? So instead of being so fired up about what Jesus had been doing, they just sort of, doesn't concern me. No big deal. If the Jews had accepted Jesus as the Messiah, there would have been no need for him to go to the cross from that point of view. But Satan overplayed his hand. He had a pair of deuces and acted like he had 4 aces. If he had not worked to blind everybody, if he hadn't dwelled in Judas's heart, if he hadn't whipped the crowds up, God's promise of a Redeemer wouldn't have been kept. Satan would have won. Whoa, he didn't see that coming. Life's filled with whoa moments. And whether it's a triumph in our life or a tragedy, we've always got to remember that God's not surprised at all. God doesn't have whoa moments. God's in charge. As always, if you need anything, there's anything you need to talk to anyone about, concern you have, just need prayer. All you got to do is ask. God bless y'all.